Conference 2016 brought to you by MPUG and Microsoft, and the session NBCUniversal, Television and Studio Operations Deploy a Lean PMO facilitated by Project Online. This presentation is given by Matt Soren. My name is Jennifer and I'll be your moderator today. This session is eligible for 1 PDU in the leadership field of the PMI Talent Triangle, and the activity code for claiming the session is on your screen now. It's MPUG 02241616. A recording of the session along with all other conference sessions will be posted to the conference website later today, and all of the sessions that you watch live or on demand during the conference will be submitted to your webinar history. Within your history, you can print or download your training transcripts as well as certificates of completion, including the certificate for all your conference sessions. The certificates for conference sessions will be available at the end of this week. You can access your history by logging on to mpug.com, clicking the My Account button, and then clicking on Webinar Reports. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please send those over to me at any time using the question function on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the session. You can also submit any questions to the MPUG discussion forum after the session. At this time, I'm very happy to welcome today's presenter, Matt Soren, Director of Portfolio Management at NBCUniversal. Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today, and hope we have a very nice and informative session for you. Again, my name is Matt Soren, and we're going to talk to you about how we deployed a Lean PMO at NBCUniversal. So just a little bit of background about myself. Like most of you here, I am sure that I am a classically trained project manager. I have worked on a number of initiatives both in IT as well as in construction management. And what we're really going to talk about today is how we put together a standardized planning and governance process throughout our O&TS portfolio. And at NBCUniversal, we have a operations and technical services group. And ultimately, that's kind of what makes TV go. We're the back end of everything, from film to TV shows and to news, and making sure that things work and everybody can come to work and has a place to get everything done. So it's a big portfolio that's very disparate, and we'll go into some details in that in a little bit. Our partner was Vibrant Fusion. They were our implementation partner, and they had worked with NBCU previously over in our Parks division down in Orlando, and they were great, to be perfectly honest with you. And you could read all their background and their story there. Some of their marketing team put that little blurb together, and we'll talk about it as we talk about the holistic story of what we did. You're really going to see how they served as a partner and part of the project team, and a couple of the initiatives that they came up and saving us clicks and space in regards to making things leaner and lighter. They played a very critical role in probably what this would have been a good implementation and really turned it into a great implementation. In summary, the whole goal here was to develop, implement, and maintain a light, lean, and comprehensive PPN governance model. Our core pieces where we wanted flexibility. We wanted to make sure that this was a strategic play, so it worked along the lines and supportive of everything else that we were doing here. We wanted to have excellent service. We needed data. And then we wanted to help enhance productivity. And the bang box here is really important. How can we service the needs of our customer to execute their mission in an ever-changing media industry? It's got nothing to do with PPM. And that's really ultimately the core of what we tried to do here. As one of our EVPs will say, and he likes to give me a hard time frequently, they have day jobs. They have things to do. And ultimately what we don't want to do in implementing a Lean PMO is to create more work. Every keystroke, every mouse click, every piece of data that's entered really needs to be providing end-user value. And we'll talk about how individuals maybe were not fully on board with that concept or needed to be re-educated to that concept, and how they eventually came around. And this is a fight. It's a fight we have constantly. We're onboarding new people today. Yesterday, we're onboarding our engineering team that was not part of our original scope, and they're asking for new things. And what we're trying to do and trying to work with them is to remind them of our lean culture and what makes sense and what doesn't. And again, we'll continue to work through that as we talk about our story. So why don't we start with where we were? The Operations and Technical Services group was a very disparate group of portfolios. We had West Coast Studio Operations, that's our Universal City group, and they managed the studios, the sound stages that do things like The Voice and Access Hollywood. We managed the control rooms that broadcast local news. They're responsible for facilities, commissaries, graphics. And that's very different from our global security organization that's responsible for threat monitoring, physical security, access, business continuity, things like that. Just very different groups. Then we roll over to the Rock Center Operations team, and that's a little bit more like the West Coast team, but you're talking about office space in New York City that's stacked on top of everybody. But we are also talking about control rooms and facilities and the artworks team. And then we move over to our global media operations. And basically what they do is they take the signal from the control room and they help to broadcast that out via satellites, via our data networks, to our own stations and our affiliates and all the cable networks, and they can deliver you the cable channel. So they're responsible for prepping it, for inserting commercials, for inserting our promos, and making sure that the signal gets out and gets delivered so you can ultimately consume the data television. We have our global real estate team, and they are exactly what you'd expect them to be. They're doing leases and business development and land development and things like that. And we have our operations team. Now, if you take a look at these, you're going to see that they're individual boxes. And that's by no mistake, because they were individual groups. We were a disseminated organization delivering complex solutions. So where were our opportunities for improvement? How do we take this single ecosystem, or these separate ecosystems, and make them into a holistic single ecosystem? We had isolated storytelling. We were doing KPIs and reporting in a very manual basis, using very fundamental and basic tools. And ultimately, we had a broken governance structure. So the way this whole thing started out, it was about 3 weeks after, or 2 weeks after the Sochi Olympics, and the president of the division called me into his office, and he was in temp space at the time, so it was actually in the bowels of 30 Rock. And he looked at a couple of us, and he said, my operating rhythm is broken. I don't quite know exactly what's going on in my organization to the same extent I used to, and we need to fix that. So that's when we started to look at this, and we started to understand that we needed to put things together. We needed to standardize where appropriate, but we also had to understand that they're different groups, and they operate differently. So the first thing we started to put together was the process. And in doing so, we needed to understand what our pressures were. So this is where the analysis started. From a technology standpoint, we had no systems, we had no real historical data, and we had no real KPIs and analytics on the PPM front. We had a lot of stuff on operations, on availability and reliability. We could tell you how many mistakes we've made. We can tell you how often we go off the air. We can tell you whether we have any issues with our critical infrastructure and our power plants. But what we couldn't tell you is how well we were executing on our projects. We have global complexity. We have customers, our clients in our organizations that are delivering on huge projects. They're taking projects that are hundreds of millions of dollars over multiple years. They're returning an ROI, $20 million, $10 million, year over year. And they continue to take costs out of the business. And then we had other groups that had little to no maturity. They were running large projects with no process. Maybe they were maintenance projects. There were no plans. There wasn't great reporting. So you had these very sophisticated groups and these unsophisticated groups in a single group, and we needed to figure out how to build something, how to create a structure that would fit everybody, that wouldn't be too onerous on the groups that were doing a great job, but they would be extremely beneficial to the groups that probably needed to do a little bit more. And then when you talk about this, you run into a culture problem. So look, we're an old GE company. A lot of the folks here, and I'm not one of them, but a lot of the folks here were from GE. and they are Six Sigma black belts. So Lean is in their blood, it's in their mind. And then you have a whole bunch of other individuals that were not part of GE, or were not brought up with the Lean Six Sigma mentality. And how do we begin to get these groups to work together? How do we bridge that gap to educate those who don't know about it, to get the people who are already involved in it and doing a great job necessarily to buy into another governance model? And those were some of the challenges and the pressures that we had. From my standpoint, I have a background in PPM as well as Six Sigma. So one of the reasons I was brought into this organization in the first place was to try to merge those two initiatives so that we could come up with our Lean PMO. So why don't we talk about implementing the Lean PMO? First thing we did was we put together a governance process. We made a strategic decision early on that those green boxes there were not going to sit in a centralized organization. Now look, we're a large organization. We have thousands upon thousands of people. We have a portfolio in excess of $500 million of capital a year. You're not going to want to run things from a centralized standpoint. So we said we're going to push out as much as we can to the individual groups. And if it means some of the larger groups have to set up some smaller divisional, localized PMOs, then that's exactly what we're going to help facilitate. But the business units themselves will own the initiation, planning, execution, and closeout. What my group and ultimately the O&TS portfolio team will own is the governance structure. We're going to ultimately, as our roadmap pitches out, going to own the tracking and the managing and the reporting on the benefits realization and the strategy analysis. That gave us a baseline to start. Now we also recognize that we have a set of expertise that others don't necessarily have, nor do we necessarily want them to build. So we've created this optional service offering for project management, risk, and issue management, where we go into some of the less mature groups and we'll actually manage their PMO structure. So what we've begun to do here is we have a single process for everybody that handles mature and immature groups, but allows us to develop the ones that still need development. And really, you're going to start to see that as a theme for us. Flexible. We need to be able to move up and down to account for the differences in our various groups. The first thing that we did was we developed our operating rhythm. And our operating rhythm is what we define as our project status reporting, our KPIs and our metrics, and our overall communication plan. Our theory here was we're going to be able to communicate up to our executives. We're going to be able to communicate down to our line leaders. And we're going to be able to communicate across the various groups and across the various organizations outside of operations and technical services. There's nothing that you are going to see in this process that is going to be life-altering. There is nothing here that you probably have not heard in another conversation. There is nothing here that is going to say, oh my God, how did these guys think of this? Honestly, this is all simplistic. What we have done here in creating our operating rhythm is we've taken the complexity out. We've taken the unnecessary out. Now look, we've had advantages that other people don't. We have a culture of Lean. We have a culture of Six Sigma. We have people in the upper executive ranks who embrace this. So it made pushing back a little bit easier. It made selling this concept a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, the reason why this type of implementation is successful is the end users buy into it. We have not had any communication from our executive team. Not a single memo from anybody above the director level has been sent out to our line team saying, you need to opt into this system. So we've taken something and we've gained executive support for the process and ultimately the automation, because we needed funding and we needed all that fun stuff. But we've gotten the traction and we've had the success because our operating rhythm, what we spell right out on this slide here, is simplistic. It's easy and it's identifiable by the end users, the people that have to do the work. Matter of fact, we've taken this slide here and we have an introduction to project management class and an advanced project management class that we actually internally train our ONTS project managers. And we teach this class. We teach operating rhythm as a unit. It's a 1-hour session that a couple of us give, and we go in and we talk about it because it's that important. And by communicating this operating rhythm and getting everybody on the same page from day one, they understand the expectations and, most importantly, why we're doing it. And when we do that, at the same time, we talk about the mandate for Lean. We talk about the mandate for light and flexibility, which you're going to hear me repeat throughout this to the point you're probably going to get bored of it. And by keeping it light and lean and exposing them to that, you're saying, hey, we got your back. We understand what you want to do. And that's the play. That's ultimately where we're looking to go. So as we run through this, we have our regular program reviews. Some of them are weekly. Some of them are bi-weekly. Some of them are monthly. It depends on the importance of the project and the audience to which we're delivering. But it's the same. It goes over and over again. And what we try to do is make sure it's pertinent. So what's the play? We got a couple of different plays here. We want to create a mean and lean workflow. How do we create a mean and lean workflow? Well, that's pretty simple. We're going to minimize the user input requirements. The less keystrokes that you have, the less mouse clicks that you have to go through, the less time you have to wait for that little dial to process on the computer as it processes something, the better off we're all going to be. And we get down to the point where we're actually measuring mouse clicks, simply because that's what the end user will take away from some of this. That's the end user component of this. For them, it's very tactile. It's, what do I have to do to make this run? Then we want to create a lean process. And this is really the heart of what you want to do, of a PMO manager's responsibility. And we created a mass customization approach. We wanted to maintain flexibility. We wanted to adapt to needs of the business. And obviously, we want to continue to improve. But when you pull back the covers and you look at these gears of our factory here and what the process really means, mass customization is we give the illusion of all of these options and opportunities. We give the illusion of all this flexibility. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the same couple of pieces, which tie back into our operating rhythm. You're going to report on the same finite number of categories. How you get there is completely up to you. And we've left that at the manager level and sometimes at the end user level. And what we really try to do is allow people to flex and manage the project and how they want to manage it, while making sure that the decision makers have the information they require. And then what we want to talk about is flexible delivery. And I unabashedly stole the reduce, reuse, recycle from one of my daughter's CDs. But this is the heart of where we are and what we do. We don't want to start from scratch. If we have something out there that works, we're going to keep using it until there's a need to change it. So when we were rolling out this system, we had a VP over in the West Coast from the finance team that was absolutely adamant that we had to take this one report that we did for Excel for him and put it in the system. Made no sense. He was literally the only person in the entire organization that looked at the report. We were doing it manually today, and he had no desire and no need to log into the system and do it and review the report. He was still wanting it to be pulled. So I'm lucky because I happen to be peers with him, so I was able to have a nice conversation with him, but we walked him through the inconvenience and the extra work that he was going to cause everybody with what his requirement was. Because his requirement wasn't to put it into the system. His requirement was really he needed the data. And by reconstructing and re-understanding what the end user requirement really was, we were able to protect our user base. We were able to say, hey, look, you don't really need it this way. You want it. You want the data. You want to look at it over here. So why are we trying to inconvenience everybody? Currently, the way we do it is probably the best way. Now, I will tell you that we've actually systematically gone back now that we've rolled this out. We have an enhancement in place that will actually compile some of this information in a little bit of a different format and a little bit of a different slice without inconveniencing our end users. But we were able to do that because we had the give and take and the overall methodology of what we're doing. So everything needs to add value. We want things to be the right size and the right work, and we want to keep it lean and light. And these were our strategic plays. This is what we sold to our executive management team. And to their credit, not only did they support this, when they ask for stuff and they look at things, we're able to look at this spectrum and say, does this add value? Doesn't mean they don't get it. Doesn't mean we're still not going to have to do the work, but we won't necessarily do the work in the system. We might find a faster and more efficient way to do it outside the system, or maybe even via another system. So we have this process. It's running along. It's actually going pretty well. And I'm sitting at our month-end operating review, and the EVP who I mentioned before, who likes to give me a hard time, actually got up at the end of the review and he said, I think that we've gotten to a point where we're finding these reviews helpful. I've gone from hating them to not having a problem that we're putting them together to where not only are you finding them useful, my boss, but I am also finding them useful because my team is now giving me excellent data. At which point the EVP's boss looks at me and says, great, let's automate. So that's how we began to move forward. Look, putting in a project management system is not a big thing, right? It's a lot of work, and it's hard, and if you do it wrong, it's going to be a calamity. But it's not like a number of people haven't done this a number of times before. But what we tried to take is a different spin. We tried to look at it and say, we have this Lean PMO methodology. We have this process of reporting and governance and implementation. What do our system requirements need to be? Now look, we actually, just like I'm sure most of you have gone through and selected things, we had an absolutely comprehensive requirements document. I think it was a spreadsheet from a functionality standpoint that must have been 18 pages long. And we scored each one of those pieces of functions and features just like anybody would do in a comprehensive piece. So I don't want you to think that when we did an evaluation, we didn't really go into detail, because we did. But with that said, we had a couple of mandates that were supreme. And when we put together our requirements, they kind of focused on these pillars: simple and easy. It's not enough just to keep a lean and light PMO. We wanted something that we could stand up quickly. It needed to be easily configurable. We didn't really want to have to do any custom development. And it needed robust ad hoc reporting. At the end of the day, we felt to get end user buy-in from the ground up, which is really how we focused on our change management philosophy, was we needed to stand something up quickly, we needed to get it out, and we needed to show how simple it was. We needed process alignment. From our standpoint, I couldn't sit here and change a process that I had just gotten my executive team to adopt. So whatever we did needed to align to our Lean PMO. We needed to continue to take what is ultimately a complex implementation and make it simple. And then we needed to figure out how to flatten the curve, and this was really the big one. How do we get rapid user adoption? Think about that. From our standpoint, most of our team is team leads. They're project leads. They have day jobs. They're running projects. They're doing other things. They're trying to get their stuff done. And you may or may not be going in and asking them to do more what they would call administrative overhead. That was probably our biggest objection. How do we flatten that curve? How do we make that curve as small as possible, right? That red line is ultimately what we've achieved. Now, I didn't make that graph. I stole that off of Google, like I'm sure nobody's surprised about, but that's a great representation of what we were able to achieve. We had some initial conversations, we had some initial reluctance, and then all of a sudden we were able to achieve this and really drive down the user adoption. So where I stated earlier, we have our engineering team coming on. They were not part of the scope, and I met with two of them yesterday, and that conversation could not have gone any easier. Their executive leader had a conversation with him about a month ago. He's like, I want to do this, and let's just make it happen because I hear these are the benefits. And always when you roll it out to the end users, there's always some concern. They might want to do something else. There's some potential issues here or there. But really what we were able to do through our portal strategy and some things we'll talk about in a little bit is simplify that process and drive down that curve. So we've picked our system, MS Project Online, and I got to admit, previously I have not used Microsoft Project Server. I've had experience with it. My one implementation did not go particularly well. I was not leading that one, but I was an end user on it, and just have not used the system before. But I happened to go to a Microsoft conference, a quick morning chat actually, when we were looking at putting together portfolio analytics and kind of mapping out that long-term vision. And Microsoft had a talk about it, and they kind of pitched out O365 and what it was going to look like and what their new SaaS engine was, and it was interesting. And it was interesting enough for us to pick up the phone call. And as we went through it and we understood it, we were eventually implemented to Vibrant Fusion. And immediately, Vibrant Fusion really got what we were trying to do. We didn't want to overcomplicate it. And for them, and to their credit, they probably run implementations that are similar for a lot of different groups, right? You implement a system, there's probably tweaks or changes and a little bit of aligning to individual unique processes. But treating things the way we did was probably a little bit different, and they jumped right on it. Our strategy was pretty simple. We were going to take one portfolio, and we were going to literally run it through the tool. We were going to run it through the tool for a prolonged period of time. And we were going to understand what the strengths were, what the weaknesses were, what it could and what it couldn't do. And we were going to see whether it could do and get to where we could flatten that curve. So what did we see from that initial pilot? Well, we saw that it was a pretty robust and powerful solution. We knew immediately that it could handle and had all the horsepower that we needed. And more importantly, we understood that it could flex. We understood that we could create something for the project leads, for people that want to run a light project. But we could also flex to accommodate people that needed to run really large and huge projects, which is critical for us because we are so disseminated. That ties back to our approach for mass customization. There are simple things that we want. Hey, look, you're going to give me all your milestones. I want to know what your cross-project dependencies are. But from an executive level, let's say from a VP and above, I probably don't need to see all your tasks. There's probably a better way to track via my financials and my spend and my project accounting how your project is progressing, rather than having my senior executives log in and monitor your task list. Same thing for issue logs. You don't necessarily need to manage how people are managing their issue logs, but I do need to know what the issues are. And what we were able to do in this system is flex that way. Where do we have some issues? Well, the user interface and the workflow from the end user standpoint was not what we needed. It was problematic. We are a very visual, very presentation-heavy organization. For better or worse, that's who we are and what we do. So the out-of-the-box configuration didn't really work for us from our standpoint. We kind of needed some help there. And because it's Microsoft Project and ultimately SharePoint, we knew we had that flexibility. We knew we can make some basic changes without a major customization effort to really get us where we want to be. And then there was some limited out-of-the-box reporting, and this is where the Quick PMO solution from Vibrant was so important, because they offer out-of-the-box pre-configured reporting that really met a lot of our needs. And ultimately, it provided us with the analytics and the details that our end managers, that our directors really craved. So we knew that there were some obstacles, but we felt by the end of this pilot that we really had an opportunity to get where we wanted to go. So what's the plan? How do we do this? How do we make this happen? And how do we continue to focus on flattening that curve? How do we stay light and lean and flexible while putting in Microsoft Project, which, let's be honest here, doesn't always have the reputation of accommodating those type of things. So we needed to understand who our target market was. So the first thing we were doing and we were focusing on is, who are the people that are going to be entering data into the system primarily? Well, that's our project leads and our project managers. So what's the difference? Well, in our lexicon, and each one of you can define it however you might want, but a project manager is quite simply a fully trained classical project manager. Typically, they have project management experience. They might be a PPM. They're using Microsoft Project to plan out their projects. A project lead is somebody who's very, very capable of running projects. And we have project leads that are running $60 to $80 million projects. So let's just be clear that just because they're a project lead does not mean that they can't accomplish great things. But they're not necessarily a project manager. They're not necessarily prone to using comprehensive project management tools and analytics, as someone like myself would be very comfortable with. We have both mature and immature project leads, but we needed to be able to accommodate how the project leads wanted to work, as well as how the project managers want to work. And we'll talk about why Microsoft's solution was so flexible and easy for us to do. We were going to standardize reporting to our executive team. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that our Lean PMO has all the answers and we can get everything you want to get. You will see quite simply that rolling up issues across all of our projects is not something that we're able to easily do. But what we've also found when we did our analytics and we did our research is we're not using that functionality. There's no net benefit to that. If we're going to use it, it would be a one-off. And we're willing to treat that as a project with the understanding that if we wanted to move forward and roll up tasks and roll up issues across the entire portfolio, which again, we didn't see any value in, we could flex and make that happen. But we didn't see that as a necessary component of how we operate today, or really how we were going to operate in the future. So our executives were willing to make that accommodation. So again, we talk about pushing back. There was another strategic report that one of our vice presidents wanted to put together, and they were like, I absolutely have to have it out of the system. And we had literally the same conversation we did it with the other vice president. It doesn't make any sense. Why? What's the benefit? What's the value add? It's quicker and easier to utilize the system to build that report than it is to keep all of that information in the report. And then ultimately what you'll see as we talk about next steps is we figure out a strategy for handling that. But handling that on day one as part of our Lean PMO probably didn't make the most sense. And I'm sure most of you can very easily make the leap that rather than utilizing our PPM tool as the sole source of data, what we obviously move to is a more analytics and data-driven approach where we combine data sources and have a small data warehouse and ultimately a level of Power BI that sits on top of it. But we're able to move into that strategy as a secondary component and grow into that while completely understanding and staying true to our philosophy of a Lean PMO. We're not going to just enter stuff into a system so we can create a report. If we can mechanize the report and automate the report, then let's take a look at doing that. And those are things that we ultimately evolve into. We're going to train the team on what they're going to use. So we were very specific. Use the tool. We're going to train you on the basic set. If you want to use more and more of the system, great. We'll train you on more and more of the system. But our initial mass training was extremely targeted. We figured out that what you're going to use and what you need it for, and then we just set up smaller ad hoc trainings for the various features and pieces. Now, obviously, there's some drawbacks to that. And what we've done to try to overcome some of those drawbacks is continue to socialize the various pieces of functionality throughout the groups. We talked about the project management training classes. We also have our various PMO councils. And what we try to do is say, hey, look, these are the features that are available. These are your opportunities for how you can grow into the system. So as you want to experience more and you want to be trained on more, we can do that. But all we focused on was getting people to use the system in a very basic format. And then the change management basics. And this all comes back to flattening that curve. We just focused on a small piece, training our project managers and our project leads, and we really try to keep the system to them. Now look, we have an advantage that some of you all might not have, and we don't do timesheets. But that is or isn't kind of out of scope for this conversation. But what we figured out was that from a change management standpoint, there's going to be a core group of users in the system. And then how do we keep everybody else out of the system? How do we let other people operate in the interface that they're going to want to operate in? Our implementation plan. We're going to set up a real rapid deployment. We did on-site configuration. That was about a week of on-site configuration, and by the end of that week, we had our alpha group set out there. We did pilot testing not too long after that. We did a fairly long beta test, really trying to get it right, trying to work the ins and outs, and we did a little bit of a custom configuration here. So when we talk about the great partnerships that we had with Vibrant Fusion, this is actually what came about. We're sitting in the on-site configuration session with our senior configuration person, and we're talking about how to design what we created, what we call the project homepage. And that's really the one-stop shop where we go to enter a lot of this information. And you're going to see that in just a second. And what he was able to do was he understood what we were trying to do. He understood that we needed that single feel. We needed it to kind of create this project homepage or project portal concept. And by understanding what we were looking to do and where we were looking to go, he was able to change how our basic setup was so that it really accommodated what we wanted. I had actually put forth a design that I thought was the best we could do, and he looked at it and said, no, you have it architected all wrong. So it's not just that he had the idea. He pushed back. He was a contributor, but he was a contributor that added such great value, and it really made the difference in what we were rolling out here. And then what you can see here is the rest of our user rollouts. We're going to look at portfolio KPIs, and then ultimately we're going to be moving on to some more holistic data warehouse reporting and business analytics and we're going to tie that into our KPI rollout. And then ultimately, we'll probably be looking at total cost of ownership and systems and application management out of this solution from a SharePoint solution standpoint as we continue to move forward in 27 and 2018. Going back to that, simplifying the process, we needed a customized look and feel, and this is where Vibrant again came in. We need a single place for all of our basic updates. And what you can see here is we've basically created a place for us to do our project updates on a single place. We have our project updates, our update section, kind of what we've done this week, what we have doing next week. We have our issues, we have our risks, we have our project financials, and then we have something we call links. So we understand that our project leads might want to use Google Docs, they might want to use non-Microsoft projects, and we supported that. We flattened the curve. We didn't want to go into this whole thing where everything has to be in the system. I'm not rolling up issues. I'm not rolling up risks across my entire portfolio. Now, there might be high-level or medium-level risks that we want these guys to put in, and then that's what we've begun to do. But I don't necessarily need them to have an entire document in here unless it adds value. We also use Dropbox as a company, so we can put our Dropbox links there. Now, I know we have OneDrive, and some people use OneDrive, but what we've said is we're creating a project portal. We're creating a single location that I can get at all of your information. And if it means some of your information isn't housed within the MS Project Online architecture, that's okay. I just need to know where it is and how to get to it from here. And by deploying that concept, what we've seen is that A, people are less resistant to having to move off of things, or I'm sorry, less resistant to moving on to your tool because they don't have to move off of things. And more importantly, what we find is that A, we don't have to change our configuration to accommodate every little thing that they're doing because we're providing them opportunities to keep doing what they're doing. So that reduces our need to bulk up our system, whereby continuing to keep it light and lean. And then this is always the interesting process, right? Users begin to play around in your system more. Users begin to really take a look at what the offering of MS Project Online is, and what we're getting is more and more requests to say, can we build this out and can we build that out? And we'll look at them, and if they make sense, we'll go ahead and potentially do that. We have a comprehensive workflow initiative that we're undertaking for our Rock Center Facilities group based off of SharePoint Online. And the only reason we're doing that is because they're like, we like this tool, we're using this for X and Y, we're in here, can we do this? And now you start to leverage the entire platform. And that became a very defining moment for really embedding what we do and how we operate as we have ancillary processes now supporting our Lean PMO. Comprehensive reporting. What are we doing? How does it work? I talked about pushing out and really moving away and saying, hey, look, we're not just going to put things in here to put things in here. The top is our project status update. It's pretty customized. It was a little painful to put together, to be perfectly honest with you. But when we talk about minimizing change management, this is how our executive team wants to see it. As a matter of fact, this is how the president of our division wants it. So that's how we made it. And everybody already put similar reports together. So we went ahead and we just did it. We made it happen. We said, all right, this is going to make all of our lives easier. And it really has. But we continue to utilize the power of SharePoint, of SQL Server, of SQL Service reporting, of SQL reporting services to centralize our data and extract some of it. So we're probably developing a little bit of Power BI. We're certainly using Project Query. We're using Power Pivot. And then we're also layering on Tableau, which is an NBC tool, actually not too dissimilar from BI. But these are our reporting tools. And what we're able to do is I'm able to extract my project data and combine it with things that already sit in our various warehouses and instances, and then report on that through some of our larger tools, whether it be Power BI or Tableau. And we're able to use Power Pivot and Power Query because that's where people want to do reporting. They want to do reporting in Excel. So they're able to grab the information and pull it out. And then what we said was, we're going to create a handful of custom reports. We're going to make sure you have kind of what you need, and then we're going to allow you to bump up data and to manipulate data and take different data sources in Excel or utilize tools that you're already using. Again, the concept here is we have a great process. We're going to prevent ourselves from overburdening the end users by having unnecessary data input points. And then we want to simplify the process. We want to continue to make things easier. So this is a great piece of custom development that Vibrant put together for us, which we absolutely love. So we've talked about making it easier for project managers and project leads to go into the system. Well, I got engineers I work with, and I have construction managers that don't even work for me, that sit in like a Turner Construction, that have no desire to log into our system because they got their own system they don't want to go into. So how do I get them to collaborate? How do I get issues and action items to work? And basically what we said is, all right, these folks are already using email as a collaboration tool. Now look, I'm not saying that this should be your only collaboration tool, but what I'm saying is for such a disparate group of individuals like we have, the common platform is email. We get it. You don't want to log into the tool. So you know what? You're not going to have to log into the tool. The project lead, the project manager is going to go in. They're going to open up an issue. They're going to assign it to a user in the system. They're going to add a distribution list. And we're going to send out information to all of you. And then you can reply back using email. And we're going to track all that information. We're going to make sure it goes into the system, and we're going to make sure that we get your responses and we get your information. So nobody's looking at old email threads to try to figure out what happened. Again, we're creating value add without really inconveniencing our end users. We're simplifying the data entry process. The project managers and leads got enough on their plate. They don't want to have to go in and update all this information, so it's done automatically for them. And it's done automatically by the end user, by the people it should be done, without really inconveniencing them. Because you know what? At the end of the day, they have to log into the system anyway. They have to respond to it anyway. What we achieved. We were able to roll out Project Online with a mature process. We were able to create a global standard and divisional customization. Pretty simple stuff, right? So let's talk about some of the cool stuff we've did. We've been able to spread success. We've had additional rollouts. We have technology. We have our real estate development group. We have international operations and owned stations, which isn't even part of my division of Operation Technical Services, are all interested and have all been coming onto the system. We have a single PMO process that goes through multiple disparate PMOs, and we have departmental flexibility. We're flexible, we're lean, we're light, we're end-user friendly, and we're scalable. We've really been able to eliminate the barriers to change and increase user adoption. What's our blueprint for success? It's a repeatable process. We've created a light layer of standardization with flexibility at the divisional level. We haven't created such a rigid Lean PMO that says you can't do this or you can't do that, because ultimately people will find a way to work around what you have. So we've taken the complete opposite approach. We've said this is what you have to do. Whatever else you need to do to get the job done, let's just keep getting the job done. Let's continue to be successful. And for those of you who are not necessarily being successful, we have a structure and an opportunity to come in, put in that training, put in those people, and develop that skill set so you can mature. Trying to cover all of our angles in the best possible way. We're collaborative. And at the end of the day, this couldn't be about our executive team. Too many times we roll out a project management system and we focus it and it becomes just a vehicle for reporting. Well, for us, that wasn't going to be the case. We're doing manual reports today. We're doing manual tracking today. We found ways to put in a system, to put in a process that adds value to the everyday lives of our end users. And I can't stress this enough, and I have to thank Microsoft. I have to thank Vibrant Fusion because they were so patient with us. We had a very diverse pilot. I have never done that before, and quite frankly, that was one of the huge keys to our success. We knew what we were getting into. We knew all of the warts and all of the things that A, we needed to fix, and B, things that we couldn't fix, so we were able to handle via communication. So I would stress as much as anything, that was incredibly important because we really aligned our Lean PMO process to the implementation of our system, and we were able to come out with a single mechanism for delivering our value. And then I love this one. If people don't use the system will not be effective. That's it. You're not going to be successful if you can't get people to use it. So let's just make it something that people want to use. Unless you're going to have the executive level support. Now look, if you're going to have executives that are saying you're going to use this, that's a very different use case than what I've just described. This is a grassroots initiative. Continual improvement. So this is basically a Six Sigma approach. We're going to continually improve. We're going to continue to automate our portfolio KPIs. So we're going to do project management and reporting, and then this year we're going to roll out portfolio KPIs. We're going to continue to look at our lean process, and again, I was doing it just yesterday, to make sure that we don't add any onerous opportunities. And then we're going to continue collaboration, and this is outside of the system. This is saying we have all these various PMO groups throughout our large organization, throughout our enormous portfolio of projects. We need to make sure we stay aligned. We need to make sure that we're all focused on this lean methodology. And for those who may not be practicing it, which is absolutely okay, we need to make sure they can easily align into it, because otherwise we're going to start missing pieces. And then if we start to miss pieces, we're not doing our job from a governance structure. So what's our roadmap? And this one's pretty simple. And then maybe we can take a couple questions. Portfolio and project management KPIs, and then our strategic planning benefits realization. At the end of the day, we know tactically how our projects are performing. We have a general idea of how our portfolios are achieving, but what we can't do is rationalize those portfolios against one of another. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out how to make that happen. We're also going to utilize SharePoint. We're building out scorecards for preventative maintenance and various other items throughout the group. So these are kind of projects, but not necessarily projects. We're going to be doing workflow, processes, analytics. And then most importantly, we're going to be talking about some of that business warehouse, some of that self-service reporting as our next big leap, going from the principles of Lean PMO, making sure that data entry only happens once, and really giving us some robust analytics and reporting. That's kind of our vision over the next 2-3 years. And with that said, if there are any questions, you can please let me know.
Yep, so thank you, Matt, so much. We do have a couple questions here in the queue. The first one is from Nancy, and she says, you mentioned you had a culture of Sigma Lean. What sequence did your organization do to move the organization to this culture?
So some of that, so let's talk about the culture holistically. I think we were split. Our leadership team was a Lean Six Sigma team before I came here. So our president is from GE, and he was trained in Lean Six Sigma from when he was in his 20s. So half the organization aligned to Lean Six Sigma, and half the organization was not brought up with it. So let's talk about the half that was not brought up with it. The first thing we started talking about were the benefits of it, right? What does it do? Why do we do this? Why do you need it? And what we were able to do was provide cross-pollination. So we took individuals and had some conversations with our leaders on the Six Sigma side, and we brought them into meetings and conversations with people who were not on the Six Sigma side. And we began to address their concerns, and we began to address the whys of why do you need this? What are you looking for? Now look, at the end of the day, some people are not flexible, and you're not going to get them to where you want to be. And if one of those people happen to be a key influencer in your strategic line, you might have some struggles. But what we were able to do is say, give us a chance. Let us do X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the day, we always offer to do manual reporting. And then what we were able to do with the manual reporting is wean them off of it. So why do you have to have it in the system? Why can't I do this for you out of the system? And then if it's really beneficial, we'll find a way to make it more efficient. Otherwise, we just kind of let it trail off. And that's ultimately what some of this reporting happens.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question comes from Deb, and she asks, regarding the simplified data entry screen, is that a custom program you wrote, or is that a project tool I don't know about?
So it's a little bit of both. One of the things that Vibrant was great about was we mapped out that custom project screen, and basically we put in, must have been 4 different lists on a single page, as well as the project task list. A lot of our projects, task lists are under 50 lines. So it's not a big deal to put it on a single page. And of course, we give them the option on the left-hand side to click into the larger schedule. So we set it up, and the basic configuration is all web part. And then what Vibrant was able to do was give us a little JavaScript that just changed the list view. So the list view is just a little bit different, but for us that makes all the difference. And then when you open the individual record, it actually defaults to the standard project, the standard SharePoint view. So it's, I would call, a little bit of configuration changes. It was not very heavy, but it was very critical to what we did. But the concept of a single page is all out of thought.
Great, thank you so much. There are a couple other questions in the queue, but we're closing in on the end of the hour here. So I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to share any excuse me, way for people to contact you, or if we should just post to the MPUG discussion forum to have any additional questions answered.
Sure, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to launch a quick poll here. If everyone could just take a second to answer that, that would be great. Give us some feedback on the session. I'm also going to chat over a link to our next session, which starts in about 2 minutes, on how Project Server improves safety and productivity for an oil company. So it should be a very interesting session. If you haven't already registered, you can click the link in the chat right now, and that will take you right over there. A recording of this webinar will be available later today through April 15th, as will all sessions from the conference. We also ask that you update your address information in the My Account section of mpug.com in order to receive the official conference desktop guide, which includes tips and takeaways from all of the sessions. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again here so everyone can see the code for today's session. Again, it's MPUG02241616. Matt, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great presentation, and thank you everyone else for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.
Thank you.